Now we're going to be dealing with Egyptian sculpture, and we're going to be dealing with a few different images, not just pharaohs, but also a little more average person. So this is a depiction of Khafre, one of the pharaohs buried in the Great Pyramids. And the primary reason behind creating a statue like this is going to be permanence of identity. In other words, sort of an insurance policy, a substitute body for the soul or the Ka. And this is actually carved out of a stone known as diorite, with tools like this. They don't have steel tools, so they're using stone tools. And when stone carving, you can use any stone or material that is as hard or harder than the stone that you're working. So you can have these stone spheres that they will commonly use. You will use something like this as a mallet, and then you use abrasion, sanding down the stone to create the fine detail and texture. And when we look at the sculpture, we see that it's very frontal. It's meant to be seen only from the front. It's very, very rigid. There's no sense of movement. And it's very block-like. And the reason is sort of an insurance policy for the sculptor. So as we start sculpting as humanity, what we do is we tend to create these very block-like sculptures. And the reason for that is you don't want it breaking. So by putting it in a seated position, it's less likely to break. And then you see details like the legs are still attached to the chair here. There's extra stone. And that again is sort of ensuring that this stays together for millennia, which is probably why we have it today. You'll also notice Khafre hits the gym on a regular basis. Probably drinks his protein shakes. Did the pharaoh likely look like this? No, of course the pharaoh didn't look like this. The reason we can say the pharaoh didn't look like this is he wouldn't have been doing physical activity, and a lack of physical activity will stop you from growing that kind of musculature. So why does he look like this? Well, because he's being idealized. Remember, Khafre is Horus. Khafre is a god, and we never show gods in times of weakness, unless you're the Greeks, but there's a whole different reason behind that. So they're idealizing him. And we're also seeing that idealized male body form, a male body form that we still idealize today, being depicted 4,500 years ago in the form of Khafre. Which brings us to another pharaoh from the Great Pyramids, Menkaure. And again, when we see Menkaure, and I'm just going to go with his queen, I've never been able to pronounce her name really well. We see another form where in this case they're standing, but they're again frontal. So you're meant to see them only from the front, even though it's sculpture in the round. They're rigid, so there's no sense of movement. And you'll notice they are deadpan. And we'll see that through the Greeks. And the reason is emotion is incredibly difficult to depict in sculpture. An idea we'll pick up on later on. Now, they're wearing traditional clothing. But a couple of things stand out. First of all, we see that they're still married to the stone. In other words, the sculptor did not cut out this extra stone. We see that he's stepping forward, both of them are. This is Contrapposto. And Contrapposto, Contrappasto, Contrapposto is the idea that by having someone step forward, they become a little more dynamic. They become a little more human. We also see that their ankles are enormous. This is not because sodium was an important part of the diet or that they were downing lots of potato chips. This is because of engineering, trying to keep that human body upright. Menkaure is again idealized. Makes sense, he's the pharaoh. His queen is also somewhat idealized. And you'll notice there's a difference between her idealization and our idealization of women in the Western world today. She looks very strong and capable. She's being depicted as if she could keep up with him if they were both out throwing bales of hay or something like that. It also gives us an idea of Egyptian clothing. Basically, she would be wearing a very light sort of linen dress. He would have been wearing this pharaonic, for lack of a better term, loincloth. And you'll see her hair looks unusual, like two giant sausages hanging from her head. That's simply because hair is incredibly difficult to sculpt. So it's more of a sculpting issue than a stylized one. But it does give us a lot of ideas of male and female beauty and beauty standards in Egypt at the time, especially compared to ours. Finally, we have the seated scribe. Now, this gentleman is different. He's not a pharaoh. So we're going to see something very different here. In this case, the paint has survived. So we have this painted sculpture of a scribe. And scribes are particularly important in Egypt and in almost every ancient culture. It's very rare to be literate, to be capable of reading and writing. So if you were, you would probably be working for the pharaoh or a major court official, writing down everything he says. And to give you some idea, it's possible if you're the scribe and the pharaoh says something goofy like, I'm now going to call Tuesdays officially Taco Tuesday. The scribe could sit there and go, I really hate tacos. So he writes down, it's Turkey Thursday. And he has a lot of power in that case because he's the only one who can read and write. He's the only one who can record what's going on. So we tend to see scribes in very powerful positions. He's seated on the ground with a much more naturalistic body. We get a sense of age to him. We get a sense that he lives a comfortable life. We can say that because he has a rather prominent belly. So we see that he's well fed, something that we don't see in common people in the ancient world. It's also a status of wealth, not only being a scribe, but also being able to be well fed. And we get a sense of the figure, a figure that is alert, that has personality. Now, most of these sculptures would have been painted. Some of the pharaonic sculptures might not have been, but most of the sculptures that you see coming out of Egypt and every other society will be painted fairly naturalistically, so we can see what he would have looked like. And if we go back and look at the eyes specifically, you'll notice that glint in the eyes. That's because those are rock crystal eyes. So they're using quartz for the white of the eye, and they're using a clear stone for the iris and pupil of the eye, creating this illusion of life in the sculpture. It's really an incredible illusion when you look at it. And there's another image of it with that stone in place, very much like the glass eyes that we see today. And these similar eyes would have been in all of those Sumerian sculptures which were missing eyes, etc.